Hello and welcome to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. My name is Mehmet, and as you know, I cover a lot of topics from emerging technologies, cybersecurity, digital transformation, and also by now, you know that in some episodes I would have thought leaders and experts in their domains. Like today, I have with me Nick Espinosa, who's joining me. Thankfully, it's early morning for him. It's like afternoon for me when we are shooting this here in Dubai. Thank you very much, Nick, for being on the show today. I know that everyone must know you, but still, for the people who never met you before, if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself and your current what you do.
Yeah, sure. Well, first things first, thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here. And my name is Nick Espinosa. I'm the chief security fanatic of Security Fanatics. We do all things cybersecurity, cyber warfare, cyber terrorism, infrastructure, and government compliance, not just US, but we work with others around the world as well. I'm also the president for the Foundation of a Human Internet, which holds the intellectual property for human ID. Our life mission is to get rid of bots, around the world and bots on platforms like Twitter and other social media platforms. On top of that, I'm on the Forbes Technology Council. I write for Forbes. I write for Smirkanish of CNN and Sirius XM. I co-authored a best-selling book, and I actually have a nationally syndicated radio show here in the United States as well. And so this is kind of what I really love to do, which is cybersecurity. So
That
again, thanks for
that's
having.
great. That's great, Nick. I'm also having a background in cybersecurity, and I'm always excited to talk to people like yourself who have the knowledge. And this would be my first question because you are, you write for Forbes. You are part also of, the Forbes group for cybersecurity. Usually, you would be the first one or one of the first ones who see the trends, right? And can tell us a little bit more what is ahead of us. What are the latest trends we are seeing in cybersecurity now?
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's pretty loaded question in the sense that we'd like to see and we'd like to hope that we're going to know all of the trends. Unfortunately, one aspect of cybersecurity is that cat and mouse game, right? We build defensive systems, we attempt to predict, how attackers are going to attempt to break into our lives, and then they innovate around it. And then we go back to the drawing board and we figure these things out. That said, we have good defensive technologies, that are stopping and thwarting overwhelmingly most threats, and we continue to develop those just as an industry. But there's a lot of different things, that are coming down the pipe. We've had a big push in cybersecurity in the last 5, 6 years for identity management because we've had so many stolen usernames and passwords in the dark web, just circulate around. That's how we've seen some major spectacular breaches happen by virtue of stolen usernames and passwords. And so having those more advanced identity management things is one of those trends that we've seen. On top of that, we also have a big push for supply chain risk because there are so many companies out there, and every Sunday I do like a breaches of the week, like video and podcast, and they keep getting longer, from all the breaches around the world that I can find. And most of those breaches now are not the organization getting hit, but the third party that they outsource to is getting hit. So those are some of the big things that we still continue to push because we see just the deleterious effects over years for this. Now, in terms of trends and whatnot, interestingly enough, we're seeing a couple of different trends coming out from the attacking side right now, and I think part of that is twofold. One was COVID. The entire world saw for the first time ever, basically every single attacker, I don't care if you're sitting in the United States or Dubai or Nigeria or China,
Right.
everybody was using COVID-19 as a lure to try to get you to buy something, click something, do something. It was a very panicked time, for the entire globe. And so that is something that we've seen. Now, why that is relevant today, in 2023 as we're coming out of the pandemic, is that a lot of the tactics that they were using were traditional tactics, and they're once again starting to innovate. And so, by virtue of that, we are starting to see new strains of ransomware, the redevelopment of other types of ransomware like Emotet, which has been around for quite some time. But we're also seeing, due to the war in Ukraine, a fracturing and a splintering of a lot of these groups. So, most famously, when Russia invaded Ukraine, we saw the Conti ransomware group fracture because half of them were pro-Russian,
Yeah.
the other half were not. And so what we've seen is a real shakeup, and by virtue of that, we've seen new groups start to emerge, like Black Basta, Play, some of the others that have been very effective at creating evasive tools. So, example, the Play ransomware gang, which is actually a group that we have been tracking actively for the last few months for a client of ours that is directly threatened by them. They are using new evasive techniques that are bypassing a lot of the traditional defenses. And a lot of companies and organizations simply do not keep up on the bleeding edge. They've been buying that same firewall, that same antivirus, for the last 5 years. So they're getting outclassed by these groups. And so we're still seeing this as a prolific thing. We're still seeing this as, a threat around the world, but we're also seeing, the intelligence agencies of the world once again continue to kick up misinformation and disinformation. And I could spend another hour on, now LLM like Chat GPT and leveraging.
We'll come to that. We will come to that.
Okay, all right, we'll talk about that, but that's a whole other conversation. But that's one of the big things that we're seeing now as well. And it's not just the cyber threats that we're seeing that can infect you, ransom you, steal your data, destroy your data, whatever it is, but it's actually the shifting of perceptions of populations based on misinformation and disinformation. And that's something that is continuing to rise as well. So we have in the cybersecurity community basically a multi-front situation here that we are trying to keep up with while we're going through an international worldwide shortage of qualified personnel, and we're also going through burnout. And so that's a huge problem that we're going to have to face the next 2 years. Really is.
Wow, Nick, actually, like you came to some points that actually I was planning to ask you about, which is it will be a good conversation, I would say. Now, the first thing you talked about how during the pandemic, cyber attacks increased, right?
Mhm. Oh
At
yeah.
the same time, we started to see the technology also evolve. Today, I had a chat with a friend, and the discussion was like the companies, they know that there is a threat, but there is a lot of noise. There are a lot of solutions. And just to give you an example, and I like to have your opinion on this.
Sure.
So we started to count a customer, if you want to protect just the endpoints, how many agents they have to install, right?
Mhm.
And then I will relate this. I know it will be a long answer from your side, which is fine. And then we start to relate this because of all this happening, customers, they are overwhelmed and they say, you know what, I'm gonna outsource this to a third party to take care of that.
Right.
Now, in your opinion, like how companies can make this balance between defending the threats, but at the same time not falling in the trap of choosing wrong solutions, completely relying on third party. What's your
Well,
take on this?
sure, sure. And I'm happy to answer it in this way because quite frankly, I think one of the biggest problems we have is product sales in cybersecurity. And hear me out because we need products, right? I mean, we need things to defend
Right.
ourselves. But one of the biggest issues that I see is there's a certain level of complacency. And what I mean by that is when you look at, let's say, how we are trained, how we are supposed to be approaching cybersecurity, from the training, from the defensive standpoint, from the evolution of threat versus traditional IT, because cybersecurity and IT are two different things. What you have are these
Right.
third-party IT companies that basically have a whole level of complacency. They're not typically using enterprise level products, even if they've got larger clients. And so they tend to push something that they know their profit margin on. They know how to handle, they know how to manage, but it's not necessarily the best thing that you can do. And so if I'm hired to consult, and one of my jobs is I consult globally with CISOs. I've got a client in Dubai, for example, where
Hmm.
we're meeting and I'm just having this conversation, letting them know the trends, letting them know all of these things. One of the things that when I first get hired, there is this assumption by the organization when I sit down and they say, okay, Nick, let's talk about cybersecurity. And my default answer is no, we're not going to talk about cybersecurity yet. We have to talk about risk. Because if you cannot tell me in hard and soft currency how many computers can be off for how long before it's so economically unviable for your organization, then how do you know what you're doing is right? How do you know your backups are good? How do you know that you need 4 agents on your computer as opposed to one, as opposed to 8? These are things that need to be quantified financially. And then once we understand holistically, okay, what exactly your gaps are, where your risk is, these are the risks we have to address no matter what, because you can't avoid them or transfer them. Then we start building a defensive strategy that speaks to the actual financial standards of the organization in the mitigation of risk. One of the biggest problems we see is people just look at, IT and cybersecurity as a giant pit in front of them on fire that they keep shoveling money into, right? And And that's one of the problems that we have. If we don't go through a risk quantification and understand the risk, then to your point, yeah, we get 4 agents, 5 agents, 6 agents. Now, I will say this on the other side. As I work with a lot of different enterprise products. We vet our products every 90 days here. And by virtue of that, there is no one company that I can go to on the entire planet that makes hardware or software and say, you can do absolutely everything for me. And so what ends up happening is you get a really good product from here, hardware, software, and you get a really good product from there, hardware, software, and you're creating this ideally harmonious concert of these products working in tandem with each other to basically layer in defense and to understand the different aspects of where you're vulnerable, and then have the whole thing basically aggregate so that it can be monitored by things like security operations centers 24/7. And so there is a balance that needs to be run. But I think one of the biggest mistakes I see is people just say, oh, we need an antivirus. That one looks good. Let's go get it. And without understanding the good, the bad with that, or even the ugly. And then we have just gaps open up. And I've walked into organizations from small to Fortune 100 where we've done assessments, for risk, and not everything's quantified, even with the largest players in the world. It just simply is. There's so many moving parts. And so I think that is one of our biggest issues, hands down.
Um, I liked, the risk quantification because I was working on the vendor side, by the way. So
Oh,
I was the salesy guy,
right,
trying not to, because I always believe in adding the value could be, just by
right.
mitigating a risk, show how much this risk could cost you on the long run, and then say, hey, like by implementing this solution, this is not now you would be saving, but on the long run, if something happens, this is how much you have saved money. Now, mentioning this, Nick, from customer perspective, because again, they are bombarded, and customers, like I used to work with them, I talk to them sometimes. They said, you know what? Like we stopped answering, these enterprise vendors. And
Oh, yeah.
the reason is everyone talks the same messaging. Zero trust, one of them,
Oh
right?
my God, don't even.
And,
You're right.
and there are a couple of other ones. And then, like everyone comes and claim, hey, I'm, the holy grail that
Right,
if you buy me, you don't need to buy anything else.
right.
Now, but back to the point, the customer at the same time is telling me, okay, I'm ready to invest in any solution that would add value to me, as we were discussing. But the problem, there's a shortage in the skills. Are you seeing this, like something ending soon? Where are we going with the shortage of skills on the
Oh,
long run?
yeah. So I actually think it's getting worse. And here's why. So back in December, I published an article for Forbes about essentially the looming crisis that we're having in the cybersecurity community, and that is burnout. There have been research done by Pew Research here out of the United States, where they were basically going and surveying veteran chief information security officers or veteran cybersecurity professionals, and something like a third of them all want to quit in the next 2 years. They're burned out, they're exhausted, they can't get budget, they can't get staff because we have a huge shortage in qualified cybersecurity professionals. And so they want to go quit and, I don't know, sit on a beach or something, for the rest of their lives. And that is something that is terrifying. Now, we have universities around the world that are spinning up cybersecurity programs, but we all know that you get that 22-year-old person that just graduates with a degree in whatever it is, in this case cybersecurity. They don't
Hmm.
nearly have the experience and capability of somebody that's been in this field for 20 plus years. I've been professionally in cybersecurity since 1998, and I was doing more cybersecurity stuff even before then. And so people of my generation, in terms of our experience level, if we leave, that's a huge problem. And so the other thing that Pew saw was that CISOs, chief information security officers, were taking less and less responsibility because they couldn't get resources. Meaning, when that data breach happens, well, what are you going to do? You didn't give me what I needed, and so of course this is going to happen. I'm not taking the blame for this. And so this is a huge problem that we have right now. And the cyber attacks are getting worse. They're not stopping. Every year we see more records hit, we see more data breaches hit. It's so unbelievably lucrative. Between 2017 to the end of 2021, we collectively, the entire world, spent $1 trillion US on cyber defense strategies. The hackers extracted something like 6 trillion plus US dollars.
Yeah.
So, so this is a huge problem. And so when we are looking at this longitudinally, we have to do everything we can to spin up and educate, people as fast as we can. And it's something that for the last 20 years, we've simply not done. The entire push for the last 2 decades has been go be a developer, build an app that delivers dog food 10% faster and save the world while you're making dollars. These are the things that we saw. And we're over here sitting like, yeah, but we have to defend it. We have to defend it. And so everybody's wanted to be that next, Mark Zuckerberg, making the billions of dollars, but there are very few that have gone into cybersecurity. Fortunately, we now have a push for that, but we are still behind. According to ISC2, we're behind almost 4 million bodies worldwide right now, and that is a huge deficit, especially for an industry that is defending the engine of the global economy. So we're going to see where this goes, but I am deeply concerned for the next 2 to 5 years in this, because it's just going to do nothing but get worse if my colleagues of my cybersecurity generation start to leave.
Yeah, I want to add one thing, if you allow me, Nick. Here,
Sure.
the problem that I see personally, and it's not only for cybersecurity; it applies to technology in general. I think um, universities and even maybe schools, I don't know, but at least universities, they have a problem, and their problem is they are so late in updating their curriculums. So the graduates, what they learn in college, it's obsolete when they are graduated. It happened to me actually.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I think that that's part of it, and that's also why I sit on the board of Roosevelt University. I helped them spin up an NSA certified cybersecurity program specifically for this, because one of the things that, unlike regular technology, cybersecurity pivots very quickly. We never know when that 15-year-old kid is going to break all of Google, and then we have to slam on the brakes and figure out what on earth just happened. Whereas I can tell you right now, the iPhone 10 was better than the 9 because it had a slightly better camera and a slightly better processor. And the iPhone 11 was better than the 10 because it had a slightly better camera and a slightly better processor. Technology improves incrementally. Cybersecurity oftentimes has to improve immediately. And that is one of those things where if you are not keeping up and you do not have an adaptive curriculum, that's a problem. Now, I will say this though, regarding that, we know that anybody that comes out of college, the person that, and right now we're about to go through a round of graduations here in the United States. I don't know when your curriculum cycle is, but we're about to have a whole bunch of new
Same.
college grads enter the workforce. Okay, good. And so by virtue of that, we also know that anybody we hire right out of college needs a lot of training, a lot
Right.
of training. You know what I mean? We don't put them right out in the field. They have to learn methods, processes, all of these different kinds of things, stuff that they just aren't getting in college. And so, yes, to your point, there is an education gap. There's an experience gap we've got problems with. I think it's a really good point to add. But either way, I mean, we're going to keep working on this, but it's going to be a difficult few years for cybersecurity, I think, until we're able to right that ship.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, one of the things when I asked you about the trends and what you are seeing, you mentioned ransomware, right?
Mhm.
So is it going to decrease anytime soon, or is it the cash cow for the APT groups and all these hacking groups?
So I don't see it going away anytime soon. It is absolutely, to your point, a cash cow. It still is. I mean, you look at some of the most prolific groups, in the history of ransomware, like R Evil, before the Russians basically arrested them, quote unquote, and had them go to work for Russian intelligence for the invasion of Ukraine. They were making $100 million US per year. That's a lot of money. That is a lot of money, and so I don't see it going any which way. And we don't have a universal standard that basically says you cannot pay. And with the advent of cryptocurrency and then washing cryptocurrency, et cetera, we still see, this as being prolific. Now, that said, what we've seen over the last decade or so of ransomware, because crypto locker is about 10-ish years old, maybe a little older now,
Hmm.
is we've seen an evolution in the tactics, right? We're up to quadruple extortion, depending on some groups. Some groups no longer will lock out files. They'll simply extort you, and we've obviously developed technologies like digital rights management to thwart those kinds of things, but I don't see it going away anytime soon. I think ransomware is here to stay. until some evil genius comes up with something that is even more harder to trace, more harder to thwart, et cetera, et cetera. But as we leverage artificial intelligence, we are moving above and beyond just looking for the ransomware so much as we are understanding the interactive behavior of the software to the kernel of the operating system, the behavior of the user, and all of that in an attempt to hopefully identify before it becomes a threat the next evolution again. And so we're going to see what that is, but it'll definitely include artificial intelligence, whatever it is. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, great. So again, within the ransomware space, because I think it makes the ultimate messaging also for technology vendors, right? So if I'm a customer and I ask you, Nick, to do a consultation for me, right? Like without mentioning vendor names, but what are the measures? Of course, there is no 100% security. We know this.
Sure.
But what are at least the bare minimum that I should implement so I would reduce the risk of ransomware?
Sure, sure. I mean, so it's enterprise firewalls that have 0-day updating, sandboxing for known threats. So when we have that outbreak that happens, within seconds or minutes, the firewall maker is identifying that, attempting to inoculate you, et cetera, et cetera. It needs SSL and TLS decryption. Something like 93 to 95% of all phishing sites are essentially leveraging SSL certificates or TLS certificates. And if your firewall cannot decrypt and inspect that, then you can download payloads through a firewall. On top of that, endpoint detection response that is leveraging things like deep learning. So it's understanding behaviorally what is happening in terms of, let's say PowerShell launches or, infected, Microsoft Word, those kinds of things. It needs to understand that. And then it also needs to start acting as a self-remediation tool. That's one of those things that I think is just beyond important. Oh, excuse me. On top of that, we have things like digital loss prevent or data loss prevention, digital rights management. And so the files can't be stolen from you and extorted. Or if you fall for Prince Ubuntu from Nigeria's, who needs help with his revolution, you're not sending him credit card numbers because your email system is blocking you from sending credit card numbers or national identity numbers, whatever it is. And that's something that I think is incredibly important. But overarchingly, I think when you have all of these really good tools and these technologies and you're keeping up with them, you're vetting your products, you're making sure that you're changing as, one product becomes less effective than new products out there. The thing that has to be consistent through this entire thing absolutely is education and training. If you are not training your people, you are doing yourself a disservice, an absolute disservice. Everybody needs to be educated and aware of phishing, of cyber threats, of scams, all this kind of stuff. And I like to say when I'm, in front of an audience live talking, that I can build you a Ferrari's worth of a cyber defense strategy. But if I'm turning the keys to the Ferrari over to a chimpanzee, how far are we going to get? Right. We have to learn how to drive. And if we're not learning how to drive, I can put in all of these amazing products, all of these amazing cutting edge things. And at some point, they're going to be worked around because somebody is doing something in antithesis of that, meaning they're clicking something, they're going somewhere, they're responding to someone they shouldn't. So we have to train first. And for any organization, if they're going down the road, you have to start by quantifying your risk first before you start putting in products. Otherwise, all you're doing is just, playing whack-a-mole. I don't know if you know that game and a little mole pops up and you hit it.
Yeah,
You're trying to whack it and hit it. That's all you're doing if you don't start with an assessment holistic to your organization.
that's a great point. And the same thing I tell my, customers as well in the same way. You cannot protect what you don't know, right? So this
Exactly.
is 100% true. Now, we touched base a little bit on AI and what AI is doing. And this is a very exciting topic, exciting times. What I'm more interested, of course, we know that AI would can be used, to automate few of the things that usually people in the
Sure.
SOC centers can do. But on the other side, AI is being used by the bad guys as well.
Mhm.
So are we seeing more and more AI against AI scenarios here? Like what the future in this space, in the AI space looks like?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and artificial intelligence has been around for years. I mean, we're just seeing the latest iteration with LLMs or large language models, but we've been leveraging artificial intelligence and security operations centers to basically sift through the noise just to basically look through all the logging of, oh, like this person went there, this person logged in, all of that's legitimate, to find the actual threats and then alert humans so that we can go to work. Artificial intelligence is being leveraged now to actually act as self-remediation tools. And so by virtue of that, the next generation of products, you can basically have the EDR, the endpoint detection response system, fight back itself and attempt to eradicate this in a way that we just haven't seen over the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years. And so this is absolutely coming. But what we are seeing now, especially with large language models, is one, to your point, it's a great time saver. I've used Chat GPT, to get stuff done like policy writing and stuff. It's fantastic at that. It really is. But on the downside, we can also have it write malware, and which means we can also have it write variants of malware as well, where we've figured out a way to get around the blocks and actually have it write things for us that it shouldn't, including legal documents, all this, just as we are testing the defenses of Chat GPT. But as we are looking at this, I think we're going to have a two-pronged problem, especially on the criminal side of this. Is one, you're going to see the criminals start to leverage these things to basically make unique approaches to encryption, to ransomware, or to other possible infections that are way more evasive than we've seen before. I mean, you can look at and I don't know if you're familiar with Bob, Alice, and Eve over at Google, but these are three artificial intelligences that they had, and Bob and Alice are designed to talk to each other, and Eve is the eavesdropper. She's designed to break in and essentially steal their conversation. And the goal of Bob and Alice are to create unique encryption systems so that Eve has a much harder time breaking in. And initially, Eve could break in seconds, and then minutes, and then hours. And now, from what I understand, Eve has not broken in years. And the researchers at Google realized that Bob and Alice created essentially an encryption standard that no human could come up with. And that,
Wow.
yes, that's what we're talking about, is looking at a Chat GPT, looking at a large language model and saying, give me 100 different approaches to creating ransomware, and it's going to come up with things that nobody has ever thought of. And now we've got a novel approach. And so it's going to take an artificial intelligence to defend against an artificial intelligence. And that's, quite frankly, the name of the game here. That's what we're going to see, I think, in the next 5 to 10 years. Now, on top of this, we're going to have massive disinformation campaigns. If you didn't know, I've written 2 articles on this, one for Forbes, one for Smerconish of CNN. And I was able to get Chat GPT to lie to me. And I got the screenshots in the articles where I was able to get it to lie to me and be evasive, and actually attempt to tell me what it thought I wanted to hear. When I wanted to hear the truth, it actually lied to me. Now, the other side of that is I was able to actually have it create a fake disinformation campaign about a presumptive presidential nominee here in the United States for 2028, because I'm not talking about 2024. But in 2028, I basically said, assume that we have a candidate that was just discovered that they had murdered somebody 20 years ago. Please write a news article describing that. And it literally went into details that I didn't give it, about how the nation is shocked, how it undermines the confidence in this candidate. Is this person actually, viable to be a president, of a country? And it's these kinds of things that it just does off the cuff. Now, imagine 1,000 of these, cranking out 1,000 news articles with fake information that a candidate killed somebody or something, putting them on fake news sites, and then having bots on Twitter and other social media platforms interact with you like humans. And
Oh,
you're that one person that says no, like, candidate Smith didn't murder somebody 20 years ago. And now you have bots linking articles that they're creating from news sources that look legitimate. And it's not just one, but others are chiming in saying, yeah, I heard that too. And here's another source. And here's another source. We are going to lose the concept of what reality is. And that is, I think, one of the most terrifying things that we have coming up with artificial intelligence. We need to start educating everybody on the planet now to this possibility. And if we don't, we're seriously doing humanity, like just literally the perception of reality, we're doing it a disservice. We really are.
yeah, like this is mind blowing, honestly. I know that because I try a lot of things with ChatGPT and now Bard, of course. Um, yeah, as you said, like you can make it lie, you can make it come out with a lot of things. You just need
Right.
to know how to do the right prompt over there. Yes,
Exactly.
it's mind blowing, and this is, I think, where, coming back to the education thing that we were talking about previously, this is
Right.
also one of the things, like, they should go hand in hand. I mean, cybersecurity, AI, any
Right.
emerging technology, actually. Now,
Right.
Nick, also something you touched base on a couple of times about the difference of the IT department and the
Yeah.
cybersecurity department, right?
Yes.
So first, why these two, they are not the same. Although, like usually, people think that cybersecurity is
Correct.
part of the IT department.
Right.
Second thing, we are seeing attempts because usually they are headed by CISO on the security part, CIO on the uh, IT part, and you see like people trying to do this bridging between the two.
Sure.
Like, can you tell us a little bit more about this topic?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, so the way I'll put it is simply this. I do not go to my podiatrist, my foot doctor for brain surgery, and I don't go to my neurosurgeon for footwork. I like to
Hmm.
walk and I like to think, right? They're both important to me, but we specialize. And like a neurologist specializes in the brain and the nervous system, a podiatrist specializes in feet. I mean, these are very important things, but we're not the same. IT people build and maintain the infrastructure that essentially runs the engine of the economy for the organization. I don't care what the company's in. They could be in construction or oil or healthcare, or you take your pick. The engine of the economy isn't actually the product, it's the technology that allows everything, the pumps to run, the medical devices to work, you able to communicate with your customers, billing, email, everything. And so IT builds that, IT designs that, IT ensures the infrastructure keeps running. Cybersecurity is the shield that defends the engine of the economy. And so we are trained differently. We are different animals. My IT people, the ones that I work with, we're married. We are, we're really joined at the hip, but they are very complacent in terms of I am keeping everything moving. I'm keeping everything moving. And on the cybersecurity side, if we have that mentality, we start falling behind. Meaning, I every day wake up reading the latest news from around the globe. I'm sitting here in Chicago in the United States, and I start in Asia, heading towards Dubai, Africa, Europe, and on back to North and South America to see what threats are out there, what new developments and innovations are out there. That is required for my job. And so, by virtue of that, we have this misperception of, well, oh, we have one person in our IT department if we're a small business. He or she can do everything no matter what. Or, we're a large organization and we have a CIO, so he or she will run everything for the organization, cybersecurity, technology. When they're two different disciplines, they're two different animals. They're specialized. We overlap. I mean, I also know how to build a network too, but when I'm designing it, now I'm not designing the entire network. I'm designing the secure components or the flow for the network to ensure that it is secure, as opposed to, okay, how many switches do we need, right? And so it's a different animal in that sense. And I think there's a lot of differentiation. And where I think people get it is when I say, like, look, I'm not going to go to my foot doctor for brain surgery. They're just two different things. And and they're both very important, but they are different. And I think people need to understand that.
I love this similarity actually. One thing we didn't touch, I think, on Nick, we talked about enterprises a lot. We talked about, like, I mean, businesses. Um, do you think that individuals or like normal consumers are forgotten when it comes to cybersecurity? What do you think?
I'm sorry, are they what?
We don't speak much about consumers. I mean, we don't
Oh,
speak
okay.
about individual security. Do you
Right.
think like this is an underrated area where, you know, we don't do much there?
Short answer is yes. I mean, we still see scams hitting individuals. I mean, there are still the emails coming out, that are phishing that people are falling for. That said, we've seen a huge focus on more corporations. So when ransomware started at the individual level. And so you're going to hit a million computers. Hopefully, if you're a ransomware gang, you're going to get $500 roughly per computer, and you're going to get 5 million. Now you can hit one organization and get 5 million. And so we've seen a shift in essentially threat against just individuals. Now that said, there are still those that target consumers, and consumers tend to be employees or owners of businesses. And so, by virtue of that, having good hygiene at home is just as important as having good hygiene in the office as well. Now, I will say this is on top of this is why consumers are important is thanks to the pandemic, the work from home movement, which we
Hmm.
basically thought worldwide would basically come to fruition around 2028, as people slowly got out of the office, they just started working from home. That happened in 6 months. because of a pandemic. We all got basically locked down. We all couldn't go to the office. Everybody was staying home and all of that. And so that immediately should have ramped up the education for absolutely everybody, because now you're using your home computer, God forbid, or you've got a company issued laptop that you're bringing home to get into the office, whatever that is. But now you're introducing risk into your home, and so home users started to become more targeted during the pandemic in a way that they were kind of dwindling, especially with ransomware attacks. And so educating our people, especially as we're working from home, is so unbelievably important. And if you're running a business and you're letting your employees use their personally owned equipment to get into your network, I think that's a huge disservice. That's a big risk that you are putting there. At least in the United States, I cannot force you as a homeowner that owns something individually, like a computer. I can't force you to use all of my defensive technologies. But if I own the laptop I'm giving you to get in, I can do whatever I want. And so that is something
Yeah.
that I think is incredibly important to understand. But yes, I to that point, while we see the education that most people get is essentially one of resignation, meaning, at least here in the United States, our media, every week we are seeing, oh, this company got a data breach. This company got a data breach. Your data was here. And you're looking at this and you're like, oh my God, I stay at that hotel, or that's my hospital system, or that's my whatever. So I'm just done. Like, my data's out there. Who cares at this point? And we see a lot of resignation in that, when it should be anything but, because data ages. As essentially time goes on, your data becomes less relevant. You move. You might change driver's license numbers. You might change whatever, and so your old data ages out. We have to understand that we need to constantly try to protect our data just by doing basic, simple hygiene things, and a lot of people just don't know that.
Unfortunately, yes. And one of the things that I try personally to do is also to raise the awareness, not only for, individuals, also for businesses, because
Right.
people unfortunately think about it. It's like, should I have an insurance policy, or I didn't have any accident in the last 10 years?
Right.
So why should I bother? While, and to your point about data breaches, so some people, they think, so what? But actually, it's not always so what. Yeah, as you said, it
Right.
might age, but some of the information, you cannot say that it's so what, right?
Right.
Now, uh, finally, Nick, like, you are on the forefront of cybersecurity, and you mentioned something which I told, other people how I'm doing it, but really, and it's so fast evolving. Like, every day, you just mentioned we have something. How to stay up to date on the latest, and, be able to absorb all these information that are coming.
Yeah.
What's the
Well,
secret sauce? I would say.
I do daily videos and podcasts. You can start there. No.
Good.
Honestly, it's just reading. It's just understanding. There's a lot of really good sources out there that are reporting internationally on cybersecurity and cyber threats. I mean, you can look at the big publications around the globe. Home closer to home to you, Al Jazeera has great reporting on cybersecurity, as does the BBC, as does Reuters, as does a whole bunch of others. And so I read all of these publications, including like Sahara Reporters in Africa, Der Spiegel in Germany, South China Times, and in China. I read globally, but if you want good perspectives on things, follow cybersecurity, people that are prolific, whether they are posting stuff daily, whether they are writing. So I follow Krebs on security, Brian Krebs. Um,
Hmm.
he's got a fantastic blog on threats that happen worldwide, and he's really plugged into those kinds of things. And so, Schreier on security is another one that's really good. And so, if you're looking at those kinds of things, I think that's important. You don't necessarily need to know, if you're not in cybersecurity, what the latest strain of ransomware is, but you need to understand what ransomware actually is in general, and why it's prolific. And if there is something that's moving across the globe right now, those are things that you can be informed on pretty easily. I read probably 40, 50 sources every day around the globe. I'm definitely not limited. Probably a quarter of those at best are from the United States. Most of them are from literally around the world, because
Yeah.
news is happening everywhere. And so, wherever you are and wherever you're listening to this, understand that it's not just your country, but your neighbors are also getting hit, right? We're all in this together. We're all interconnected. I mean, think about this. You are literally on the other side of the planet right now. We are having a conversation in real time over the internet, and that's how fast data can move. I could literally send you a virus right now. You could send me a virus right now, and
Don't.
it would be. I'm not going to. You're not going to. But my point is that when you're looking at the speed with which
Yeah.
something can move from outer Mongolia, where there's an internet connection, to here in Chicago or to Dubai or wherever it is, these things are fast and they can be very prolific. And so understanding that we're seeing trends, and as we see these trends, they're being reported on. So go pick some good top tier sources, go follow some people in cybersecurity, and you'll get a better perspective on exactly what's going on, whether it's rights for privacy, whether it's the latest issues with, ransomware or the latest strains of viruses. We're talking about all of these things, the evolution in artificial intelligence that's leading to things like disinformation or more effective ransomware, but also more effective defenses. So these are things that I think everybody, if you're just looking at it, really can get plugged into pretty easily. Pretty easily.
Yeah, right, Nick. And also, one advice on this: if you don't have time to read the full article, leverage ChatGPT. It does very good job in summarizing things for you. So,
Yeah.
um, like myself, I have a set of feeds, and the ones that you mentioned, of course, they are there. For cybersecurity, because I follow multiple things. For me, it's a little bit tough, especially after I started the podcast, because I have to cover a lot of things.
Right,
But
right,
yeah, so yeah, like you can have the feeds, use any of your favorite, news feed reading
right.
applications myself, and I'm not doing any ads here because they don't have any program actually. I use two apps. I use Flipboard and I use Feedly,
Mhm.
um, where I combine all the sources, and of course,
Right,
you know, I make a way so I don't see the same news 10 times, so I don't have to consume the
right,
same content hundreds of times. But yeah, hundred
right.
percent on your point, and follow the podcast, guys. Like sometimes we bring really the latest for you. Nick, before we close, and this is now a traditional question I'm asking,
Sure.
anything you wished I asked you?
Anything you wished that I asked you? Um, no, just if I'm
Oh,
thinking about this, that's a actually really good question. I mean, I think we covered a lot of the core basics. One of the things that we probably didn't cover that we could have covered more in depth, I think, is right now what we're seeing in and understand that a lot of cybersecurity dovetails with the political situation that's going around the globe, various countries, not just the United States, but around the globe. Um, and so what we are seeing right now is essentially due to a breakdown of trust, a rise in, two opposing sides, that can lead to things like a lack of privacy or reduction in privacy, authoritarianism, so I think that is something that, thanks to social media, thanks to our interconnectivity of the internet, is something that humans have had to address and be educated on. And I think we're going through political strife in multiple countries around the globe, excuse me, specifically because we are in a position where humanity has simply never been. We have the largest information delivery system, and by virtue of that, the largest data mining platforms that humanity has ever seen. We've never been this interconnected ever in our entire lives, in our entire history of our species. And I think that's something that needs to be talked about, needs to be addressed as well. But we can save that one for next time, I guess.
yeah, sure. Actually, it's a very engaging topic, Nick.
Okay.
Um, and really, I appreciate the time you took this morning to be here. And for the ones who would be listening or watching this, I would make sure to put for you where you can read the articles that Nick usually publish, and you can follow him if you want also. So I will publish this. And as usual, if you have any questions, any feedbacks about this episode or about the show in general, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. You know how to find me. You can even send me an email, LinkedIn, Twitter. This is where I'm active the most. And also, if you are interested to be a guest on the show, same as Nick was today, please also reach out to me. I would be more than happy to discuss this with you, and we can arrange for a time for recording. And again, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you are watching this over YouTube. If you are listening on your favorite podcasting platform, also don't forget to subscribe. Tell your friends, your colleagues, your family. You would not regret. The show is full and rich in content, and I'm trying as much as possible to cover a lot of topics to make it more um, appealing to you. Thank you very much. And until we meet in the next episode, thank you.